Hip-hop.
Anonymous.
Saturdays.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Sapo Saturdays. You got your boy ASAP Froggy, the one, the only, Bingus Frog. And we are coming to you live from Burbank, California.
Beautiful Burbank,
Once
California.
again.
Yeah.
And we've got quite.
You love rocking into those new other songs.
It's
lately.
so good.
It's so good.
It's so good. I'm just gonna leave it because it's
Oh,
bringing
yeah?
us some an adrenaline, electronica.
Yeah,
That's what it's called.
It's
It's good.
it's got my shoulders shaking. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are in beautiful Burbank, California. If you've been following our Instagram story, Twitter posts, and all of that, you'll have seen that we built a new studio. And it is looking gorgeous.
We're inside
if
of
I
it
do say
right
so
now.
myself. We are inside of it
We're
right
in
now.
it.
It's true.
Yeah.
And we are Sapo Studios. Our goal is to bring the majority of profits and ownership rights back into the hands of artists in a world dominated by corporate entities. We are here every Saturday. Yeah,
Every Saturday.
Every Saturday.
Noon. We've been here for a while.
We've
keep
been here
coming
for a while,
back.
12 p.m. Pacific
Yeah.
Standard Time, and you can catch our old shows on sapostudios.xyz. That'll take you to our YouTube, to our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all the good places. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We have a great guest in studio with us. We have Pat Dimitri. Thank you for joining us, Pat.
Yo,
Welcome, man.
can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is cool. I'm into it. I'm excited.
Thanks, man. Yeah, and, we've been trying to get you on the show for a while. ASAP here has...
I have followed you on the interweb.
Yeah,
because I'm also knee deep in NFTs.
Right.
Yeah, well, I've said in
from
the
that
past
world.
that he has a really good nose for sniffing out talent, and he'll just come to me every so often like, man, I found this person like randomly on following this account, following that account. We got to figure out having them on our show.
Dude,
I'm like, yeah,
so good.
message them.
That's awesome.
And so I think he reached out a couple of times, and we finally made it happen, and we're so excited to have you in studio.
That's awesome.
Really, really cool that you're here. So I want to start off with the most important question in my mind. For a musician, is it more important to you that you hear music or that you play music? So if you were if you lost
What?
the ability to do one or the other,
I see what you're saying.
which would impact your life more? It's the classic. Would you rather be blind or deaf?
Right.
But it's really more impactful for a musician specifically because you're.
Yeah. It's a really interesting question because I actually find that my experience with music, playing it versus hearing it, is specific to me, are so dramatically different, where I feel as other career musicians there is less of a gap between those two experiences, because I notoriously at this point in my life listen to very little music, not because I don't love it, not because it doesn't in fact I'm like too sensitive, so if I listen to like an hour of music, I'm like emotionally just more emotionally vulnerable than I care to be for the rest of the day. So it's sort of an event for me. So the experiences are very strange for me, but playing just feels like it's like breathing for me. Like
Right.
I have to do it all the time because that's what I do. And I've been playing for 20 years and I've been playing professionally for about 12. So it's just second nature to me, but listening to it is such a it just hits me like a ton of bricks. So I don't seek it out all the time unless I have a goal where I'm like, okay, this person released something I want to be aware of what's happening in contemporary production, or I'm just stuck as a composer. Let me try to gather ideas. So all that is to say is, like, I don't know how I could play music if I couldn't hear it. So I guess I have to hear music. Like, because if you took away my
Beethoven.
yeah, well, that motherfucker's crazy. Like,
As are you.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying you don't have to hear the music in order to play it because he figured it out.
But
he can't be the only
for
one.
him to have been doing that means he was hearing it in his head, which
Well, he felt the
Right.
vibrations. I think was a lot of
Absurd.
it. Absurd.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like this is such a long-winded answer, but like for him to be hearing stuff that clearly in his head, everyone has different like cognitive strengths and weaknesses, of
Sure.
course. I've developed the ability to hear things in my head, but it's something I had to like drag along over 20 years. That was never my strong suit. Just like certain people have like aphantasia, meaning they can't picture things in their head clearly. I have that.
Oh, really?
And I think it might be related to being able to hear things clearly.
So is that to say that when someone's trying to describe something to you, you're like, I can begin to get a handle on what you're trying to tell me?
Yes, I can conceptualize it, but I don't see it. And
Wow.
I didn't look until I was an adult. I didn't know other people were seeing shit. I thought they were just like
That's wild.
I thought it was just a vague conceptual thing.
Like I have like a photographic memory. Like I can picture things in my head.
I see nothing.
That's
Well,
wild.
and it's
I
funny
see the
too.
world in front of me, and then I just have like foggy concepts in my head.
That's so wild. It's funny
And
too,
then
'cause
with
I was
music-
just having this conversation with someone where there's actually, I think, recorded two types of thought that people have.
Yes.
And it's either that you think in like full sentences, and there's like
And you
this
have, like, a
ongoing
conscious, like,
dialogue,
your voice.
yes, like
There's
an
a
inner
voice in your
voice,
head.
and then there's some people that like are
silent.
either not silent. I think that it's more fragmented. It's not completely silent, but
Actually,
it's
my girlfriend and I have had this conversation.
hers
which
is silent.
She
Get
she-
outta
She
here.
has, and I'm like,
Oh, that
there's no,
explains a
there's
lot.
no way. I'm like, that's impossible. And then she would have a thought, and I was like, and then she would say something, and I was like, did you hear that in your head before you said it? And I was like, you had some kind of thought,
right.
like you
It's
have to
no. It's
explain
just the
to me.
minute it came out of my mouth, I was thinking it.
Yeah,
Right? Is she like?
yeah, exactly. It's
Just like
I don't
that's
get.
what I feel like that would feel like if you were thinking all of the thoughts. You would have to talk like this because they would happen as you were.
There has to be something before your mouth.
right,
moving.
right.
It has to
I would
be.
think so. I would think so.
Yeah.
I was like, are you an alien?
wow. So every time she like gave me a dig, like that came right off the cuff.
She's right
She
off
didn't
the
even-
cuff. She's from Boston as well.
Jeez.
That's how they do it there.
Yeah, there's notoriously a lack of filters.
Because you're from
I've
Boston
always
as
been
well,
told
yes.
I have no
Right.
filter.
But you're
That's-
from New York.
I
It's
am
a
from-
whole
yeah.
East
Yeah,
Coast thing.
But I went
It
to
is.
school in Boston.
I'm very filtered. I'm from the Midwest.
or
go.
not Boston, but UMass Amherst.
Okay, yeah.
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 So growing up in Boston, what was your exposure to music like? What scene were you into, and kind of what got you
Yeah.
into playing initially?
Yeah, I again feel very separated from the vast majority of like competent or professional musicians because I did not have a musical family. We were just talking about this before we started that both my parents are immigrants from Egypt. And very typical immigrant story where it's like you try to get to America and then you become a doctor or a
Right.
lawyer or an engineer so that you can fucking not die. And that's and like that's what you do. And so like I'm like the younger child and I pop out and I'm like, no.
No,
None of that.
I'm a
So
creative.
being the younger child, were your parents more strict? You have an older brother.
Yeah, he's 10 years older because I was an accident. And
and the older brother's a doctor.
he's
Do you have a January birthday?
he's in biotech.
Oh, he's in biotech. Okay,
Yeah.
secure career.
March. So my
March.
birthday's in like Thursday.
So
So
it's
happy-
still like
happy
an
early
after
birthday.
Easter thing,
Like-
like with
Right.
because like I have 3 cousins. We all have the same birthday,
Uh-huh.
which means 9 months after the Easter where you don't touch anything or you behave yourself during that
Lent
time.
or something?
Yes,
You give
like
up sex,
during that
I
time,
guess?
right? Yes. So that's why I was curious if
Right.
So you're close
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
by 3 months,
I was right there.
2 months. Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like I don't think I was exposed to that much, but what I was exposed to did inform a lot. Like my brother was into the Smashing Pumpkins, and like, listen, do I sound like the Smashing Pumpkins in present day? No, but that was like something that I digested a lot of their music and whatever. That was
Foundational.
yeah,
Building
it was
blocks.
foundational in the sense that like I had a reason to pick up guitar and to be like, let me try to play something because I saw this dude play guitar.
And
Right.
and obviously initially at that age you're just picking it up as a hobby, but were your parents still apprehensive because of that whole traditional aspect of things?
I feel like just picking it up was something they were they didn't know the shitstorm that was to follow in later years.
They're like, Pat, you're going to have drugs. You're going to be
Yeah,
in gang. You're going to have tattoo.
Yes.
Going
my
down
God.
very dangerous road.
Yeah. To this day, they would be so irritated if I got tattoos, and I'm 35.
Which is why we're not going to tell them about the tattoos you already have.
Right, right. It's so annoying. My career would be in such better shape if I had tats. But that's neither here nor there.
Well, let me ask you, do you really believe that from an image perspective, that it's like really important to cultivate an image in order to be a successful career musician?
It certainly depends on what your role is as a professional musician. But as a touring guy, it couldn't have hurt. It couldn't hurt.
Right.
Do I think it'll make a massive difference? I have no fucking clue. But like I've done 3 Warped Tours in their entirety, so they're like 7 weeks each, where you play about 30 or somewhere between 30 to 50 shows. And so I've done 3 of those, and 2 of them I played in 2 bands at the same time. Not the exact same time, but like one band's playing at 1 and the other band's playing at 3 or whatever. Which just because of my network, I was able to double dip twice.
That's wild.
It's amazing.
Dude. Like,
so
how
crazy.
how does your brain like hold all of the songs and material to be able like to not mix it up?
Yeah, no, that
Especially if you can't visualize anything.
right. I operate on pure. I mean, we're already going for it, but I operate on like pure memorization for the most part. So like I've done gigs where, it was an hour-long set. We played at the Ace Theater. My buddy Watsky, who I've toured with considerably, he made
his name?
Watsky.
Oh, Watsky.
He's a rapper. Amazing dude. We can get into my history with him later. But we did this show where he had done a music video for every song in his album. So we're talking like an hour 15. And he was like, I'm going to feature... Oop, that's fun.
Yeah.
LA, baby. So he was like, I'm going to do a show at the Ace Theater, a one-off show where we play the entire album to the music videos like a movie. And,
cool.
And so he hired a string section and a piano player in addition to our normal band, which is like guitar, drums, bass, backup vocals, right? And like trumpet and synth and whatever. And so like the string players are reading an hour 20 of the material, and I just have it in there, and so we're both looking at each other, and I'm like, how are you doing that? And they're like, how are you doing that? So I've just, you have to make up for your weaknesses one way or another, and so I've leaned very heavily on my ear and very heavily on memorization.
So
awesome.
what happens in a moment of improvisation then for other musicians to take that time? Are you able to branch out and then adjust back?
Yeah, well, I think improvisation is like where I'm most comfortable.
Okay.
And I think
Because you just have an astounding ear. Is that
it's
where
my
it comes from?
It's my ear, but it's also just like my sensibilities, just like from playing for so long with so many great musicians that you just sort of absorb all this stuff. Because like you can be on tour. This is a dumb example, but it's a relevant one. So we were on tour. The last time I was on tour was almost a year ago now. And we're doing like whatever 1,000, 2,000 person clubs with Watsky. That's like my main band over the years. And it was during the NBA playoffs, and like we just started slipping in like this like 90s NBA theme, like da 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 da, round ball rock. Yeah, exactly. And so like, and when we're like 10 shows deep, we just start doing things to make each other giggle during the show and try to get people to crack and stuff. And so you just start slipping and stuff like that. And so you're listening for it, finding a tasteful place to insert it. Granted, that's a more like silly thing, but like, I would say my entire musical identity is built off of improvisation and like reacting and sort of like reflecting what I see in the world around me. Like, people will be like, what are you influenced by? And I'm like, movie scores, Back to the Future. Da, 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 da. Like, I absorb everything around me, like a cool looking tree or whatever.
I was literally going to say a snail on the sidewalk.
Yeah. So like, I am sort of just a reflection of the things that I absorb and then come out in a way that I hope is competent and makes sense musically.
When we talked earlier about different schools of thought and the way that some people form thoughts before they speak and things like that, when you're playing and it's in an improvisational segment, and it's like you've seen those musicians like that kind of sing while they play, and they're like moving their mouth while they're doing their solos.
Yeah.
Are you hearing that those sounds kind of in your head before you play them, or is it kind of like, okay, I know what key I'm
or is it
supposed to be in,
simultaneous? Where
and
you're
it's just kind of coming out of you,
Yeah.
and you know where your pocket is, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, as long as I'm within this realm, it's gonna work. So I don't need to hear it in advance.
Right. It's I would say it's simultaneous, and it didn't always used to be. Before, I think when you're learning, again, like all of this is coming from a place of, I don't think I'm a natural musician. I don't think I'm a gifted musician. I don't think I was. I didn't come out the womb more like exceptional in any sort of way.
You had the same tools as everyone else.
I
You had
really
fingers,
believe that.
Yeah.
Like, I do think there are outliers.
We had a
in-
very long conversation about this like 12 years ago, if you remember that.
Yeah.
We argued about it on the way to a catering event where I was like, I think all.
Wow, you've been holding on to this
no,
for
no,
a
it's
while,
just,
man.
It's just I believe the same thing. I believe we all kind of have the same tools.
There are certainly outliers, right? There's this guy in music now, Jacob Collier, who
Oh yeah, he's unbelievable.
he's a freak, right?
Yeah.
Like that's an outlier. He also clearly works extremely hard, so not to take away from that. Then you have like Shaq, like like that's a genetic outlier, dude. Like we can't deny that, but I actually think there's very few outliers. And
but
so-
Shaq wasn't great at shooting free throws. Like he,
Yeah, and
he
he's-
wasn't gifted at shooting.
and he's still like a top 10 player of all time.
Yeah.
So that means
Right, but I think it's fair to say that, passion plays a part. And
Yes.
Totally.
there are certain people that will tell you, like, especially when you're trying to, let's say, if you want to use a specific example and you're in film and you're trying to get like the film thing off the ground, you may have to wear a lot of hats and learn a lot of things to be able to operate your little production situation there. And maybe as a director, you also have to know some lighting and you have to know some sound, and that's all well and good, but I think there's something to be said for having a passion for the thing that you're doing, and having that ability to choose and then leaning into that thing. Sure, everyone's kind of capable of everything to a certain respect, and I do believe that to a great deal.
Has your view changed in the past 12 years?
No, I think I don't remember this conversation that we had that you clearly are holding on to for 12 years.
But it just got brought up now.
But no, I think I would imagine, because I'm pretty consistent with things, because I can be very like
Consistently
regimented.
inconsistent.
Oh, is that
No,
right?
I'm just kidding.
Sometimes
I'm just
we're all
tugging.
hypocrites. That's being
I'm
human.
just giving you a little tug.
But hey, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Saturday morning. But yeah, no, I think that I've probably always felt that way. That it's like, I believe that there's a lot I'm capable of, and there's stuff that I don't inherently know, but that I could absolutely learn and be proficient
Totally.
in. But I think that you really do have to have a passion for those things and want to do it, and it can't be something that like you're fighting avidly against, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And sometimes
100%.
it can just feel that way if you're in a position where it's like, damn, I have to learn this to be able to do the thing I want to do, and that can be frustrating.
yeah. So I think
And rant.
this is all stuff that I love talking about. I think passion is only a powerful thing if it actually leads to you doing the legwork on a daily basis for years
Yes,
to
it
get
has to
where you
convert
need
into
go.
action.
Because like we all have potential to do a variety of different things, and that's great. Maybe some people have way more potential than others, but it really doesn't mean shit, right? If you don't
lost
get
potential.
into the trenches and execute, it doesn't matter what your potential is. It matters what you do ultimately. So I think if you are extremely obsessed with wanting to accomplish like being a competent musician or being a photographer or being an engineer, this or that, if the passion is what drives you to do the boring shit 8 hours a day to get good at that, then it makes a big difference. But
And did you do that?
yeah, exactly.
You did all the boring stuff.
And to tie it into the original question, I do hear things simultaneously as I play now, but I didn't used to. So I worked at that, and it was something that developed over a very long period of time, because at first you're just learning the geography of your instrument. You're like, this chord shape looks like this, and it sounds like this. This key is over here. It
Right.
sounds like this.
So, like, do you have like the shape in your head of like if I were to say like ba-doo, ba-boop, ba-doo, boop, boop, would you know like I'm gonna go start at this place of the neck? Based
So
on-
melodically, no, but
Because you didn't sing it well enough.
Ba-doo,
No, I'm
ba-boop,
just
ba-boop,
kidding.
ba-boop.
so I have something there's like in music we talk about perfect pitch and relative pitch. Perfect pitch means you can like pull an F sharp out of nowhere with no context, and very few people have perfect pitch.
Charlie Puth.
He does have perfect pitch, yeah. And people also have varying degrees of perfect pitch where it's like extremely clear, and some people they just can like pull a C and then that's like their home base. And relative pitch means if you play one note, if I find that one note on the fretboard, I know where everything else is. And functionally relative pitch
And that's what you learned.
Yes.
And I think it's important and kind of inspiring for people to hear that that's something that you can learn.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's not something you're necessarily born with. Because
I'm inspired by
yeah,
it.
I mean,
super
I know
interesting.
personally whenever I would look at like an Eric Clapton or a John Mayer, and I'm seeing them just like with their eyes closed, not even looking at the fretboard, wailing away, mouthing all of
It
the
took them a long
sounds.
time
I'm sure it took them a long time to get to that point, but it does look so natural and so second nature that it looks like, wow, these people were touched with this gift that I couldn't possibly ascend to that level.
And
that's just not
heard,
true
heard
necessarily.
something
It's not.
from Ed Sheeran where he was like, people say, oh, I'm naturally gifted, and he was like, I'm not, and he's like played like one of his first things singing, and he sounds horrible. He sounds absolutely terrible. So what did you do to like learn that?
Yeah. So
Or like something that I could take away and like go home or
Well,
something.
yeah.
Listening.
Practice makes average.
yeah. No, I'll give you like my brief playing history. So like I pick up guitar around, I want to say like maybe 13 or 14, so like relatively late.
And at that point, to take us back to Boston, you're listening to the Smashing Pumpkins.
Yes.
And what exactly was the impetus for you to actually pick up the guitar? Were your friends putting together a
You're
band
eating a
or
roast beef sandwich.
Yeah, like honestly, I think I was just like, I probably just wanted to be cool. I'm guessing because like, listen,
That's why I picked up guitar.
right. Like, I mean, listen, my parents are the most wonderful, caring people on the planet. However, they did not necessarily teach me and my brother like basic social skills because they don't have it.
Yeah, I was about to say because they don't know him either.
They don't have social skills.
You know what? Let's go down a side path here. I want to hear one funny story about your Egyptian parents in this country because Dave's father has told us so many funny stories, one of which sticks with me, which is his friend who comes to this country and is looking for something to eat at the supermarket, something cheap, and he walks away with cat food because something on the label of the tin looked exactly like some Egyptian canned food that they had.
Yeah.
And he's eating
And
cat
it probably
food.
tasted okay.
Yeah, and he was eating cat food for like weeks before Dave's dad was like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "I'm eating," and he's like, "That is cat food."
disgusting.
So, what do you have a story like that?
You know what's crazy is none of
Your
it is
parents
funny
never
to me.
ate cat food.
It's
no?
not. Well,
No, I'm just messing with you.
I'm trying to think. My dad had like frozen escargot in like. And I was like, and as a 12-year-old or something, I was like absolutely repulsed. I was like, "Can you get the snails out of our house?"
Right.
It's like it's not even like good. It's not like that's supposed to be some like luxury item that you get at a nice French restaurant. You're just freezing Costco snails. But like any of the crazy shit like that does not make me laugh. I'm still very irritated
Tormented by it?
Yeah. None of it is humorous to me. Like, and I'm like reaching for a memory that might be funny to someone else, but it's just like, no, I just grew up in a house like surrounded by like papyrus and statues that all look at you, and I'm like, no wonder I'm like a very anxious adult that's averse to clutter. I was stared at by paintings and statues and fucking.
Did your TV
and-
remotes like still have like the plastic on them? 'Cause, like a lot of my aunts and uncles, like
no,
you'd go to their house. And
But
it was
there's a couch in a house where it's like still covered in that like
Yep.
plastic.
I was gonna say
and
the
I'm like,
couches as well.
Yeah, it's like it's awesome when you buy a couch, but then remove all of the comfort and the aesthetic. It's really clever.
And you've got all these statues staring at you, asking you why you haven't become a doctor yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no wonder. Like it's crazy how as you start to get in your 30s and older, like how it really starts making sense why you are the way that you are.
It's-
Well, and I
it is a
wonder.
wild time in life where you're like, that's why I'm going through that now. I'm 37 and like it's all clicking. like as to why I'm an anxious adult.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do start later in life kind of trying to figure out those things out, and you put puzzle pieces together, and you're like, oh, okay, that's where all of this shit comes from.
It's the most miserable detective job ever.
So do you think that in some ways, you talked about, you kind of touched on the fact that they didn't really give you much of a standing to be social.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that in some ways picking up the instrument was your way of communicating in some way outside of all of that?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I think I clearly was reaching for some sort of outlet without knowing it. And I was just like, I don't know how to get girls. I don't know how to be cool. I don't really know how to do much of anything. So this seems like maybe
But you know who does? Kurt Cobain.
Yeah, like Billy Corgan is like this weird goth dude. If he can be cool and successful, then anybody can. And so I was just clearly that was me trying to reach for some sort of outlet. And my first few years in high school, I'm self-taught. I start getting.
Did your parents buy you your first guitar?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So like they were cool with like the idea of me learning an instrument. They were like, "Oh, it'll look good on a college application."
Right.
And they had me doing all other sorts of shit that was just for college.
Did they try to, when you initially said I want to play guitar, were they initially like, what about violin?
Yeah, no, they didn't push the strings, but they pushed. I think we had like an electric piano in the house, but I just never connected with it.
Or they're like, Patrick, why don't you sing like Omelka Sum?
Right. Yeah. My dad loved Yanni.
Who doesn't?
That was a big thing for him. No, they got me into. I was in like the choirs and shit in high school, and I was in an audition only a cappella group in high school. So I was like getting a musical sort of education, but with the guitar, I was self-taught. And then I started becoming obsessed with like these shredder guys. These guys like Buckethead and Steve Vai and Joe Satriani and Paul Gilbert. These like very quintessential 80s, 90s shredders.
Jeff Beck.
I didn't get into Jeff Beck until I was an adult. I wouldn't classify him as a shredder, but he
makes sounds out of the guitar
He's
that
one
are
of
just
the-
insane.
he's someone that I love in present day, not as a teenager. Like he's one of the most melodic, I think, musicians that ever existed. I could talk all day about that.
And when you say you're self-taught and you start to get into all of that, were you starting to teach yourself just by trying to learn songs that you liked, or were you actually going through all of like the scales and learning arpeggios and whatever else?
So I'm old enough. I think we're on the same age, but I'm old enough where like YouTube was just becoming crazy when we were in high school. Like it was. People were not putting videos on the internet until YouTube,
Right.
Except for like maybe like Newgrounds, and it was like weird shit. But YouTube was just starting to be a thing, so I'm just going through YouTube. I'm looking at like bootleg videos of Buckethead shredding, and I'm looking at bootleg videos of like Paul Gilbert giving guitar lessons. So I'm starting to sort of figure out basic scales just from that, and I'm using my ear to see, okay, I guess these scales work over this song that Buckethead plays, so I can sort of try to match what he's doing. But it's not a complete education, and my knowledge of chords was non-existent because I didn't care about chords. I just wanted to shred because it's very common.
Which is so cool and probably made you such a better guitarist, because I know going in, I felt like, okay, if I can at least learn chords, bar chords, now I can't think of the power chords, anything. If I can at least learn chords, I can put a song together.
Right.
And now I can play a song and people can sing along and I can fake through it.
Which is a much healthier approach. Because
I would have been so
you were
intimidated starting with notes.
No, but you were trying to like play actual songs to connect with people. I was trying to shred so hard that
melt
other
people's
teenage
faces.
girls would fall in love with me. So that what you were doing was a much less.
But you had a better
antisocial
tactic.
thing. But it left huge gaps in my knowledge, and now like I'm extremely chordally focused because I think like in terms of songwriting and composition, the harmonic content of whatever you're doing is intrinsically linked with your melodic content and your rhythmic like all three of those things are essential and equal partners. And I was only learning one thing because I wanted to shred so that I could win guitar playing competitions.
And you talk very specifically when you talk about all of these things, and I saw some of your videos online where you talk about thirds and tenths. Did you deep dive into music theory after you started to kind of learn the instrument? Because you sound very proficient when it comes to talking about the intricacies of the notes and the chords and what it all means.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so in high school, I was starting to pick up very basic theory, but again, my ear was ahead of my vocabulary. But when I was a senior in high school, I was in a theory class with 4 other kids, and they would play an interval and be like, name that interval. But in the spectrum of learning music theory, that is very primitive. That's the first kind of things you start learning. And
hey Dave, play me an interval.
So an interval is just the relationship between 2 notes. Okay. So you can play any 2 notes. So in Western music, we have 12 notes. Okay. Right. And so an interval just means you take any of those 2 notes, play them at the same time, and they have a relationship that a accomplished musician can tell you exactly what that relationship is immediately.
Meaning what? Can you give an example?
Yeah. Is this plugged in?
Yep.
Okay. So let's see.
That is a gorgeous guitar, by the way. We were commenting on it earlier. It's got birds on the fretboard, and
brought to you by PRS Guitars, sponsor of Pat Dimitri.
Oh, nice.
Maybe we do need that mic stand, huh?
Oh yeah,
I'll take it if you got it.
Yeah. I'll set that up right now.
So one very basic example of an interval. I'm just holding my guitar and the mic, so I'm not fretting anything. But guitar is comprised mainly of perfect fourths. We've all heard that. We've all hit a guitar and the top 2 strings, and that's the sound it makes. So that's a perfect fourth. That's an interval. And so the harmony that those 2 notes will always make that sound. I could play perfect fourths all around the neck, for example. So, sorry. I'm all over the place. Yeah, so those are all perfect fourths moving all around the fretboard. Sorry, I disconnected my headphones.
Stand by. But yeah, that's very, very interesting. And perfect fourths, so that's B and E.
Correct.
So A, B, C, D, E. 1, 2, 3, 4. Because they're B and E are 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes,
is that why it's fourths?
You can do it that way. You can do it that way for sure.
But is that the theory behind why it is what it is?
That's a good question that I don't want to give a wrong answer to off the top of my head. So I'm not going to answer it because I don't recall.
Okay.
It's easier to. I got ahead of things, so it's easier to say because the smallest interval is a minor second, so it's right. That's the smallest distance between two notes in Western music, without going into microtones and stuff. Because we can go there's that had a bunch of microtones in between the 2 notes, but the smallest interval, minor second.
Mm-hmm.
If we add one more half step to that, major second. We add another half step, minor third, major third, perfect fourth. There's a lot of names for this one. Some people in the Gregorian chant days, we would call that the devil's interval, or the tritone, or
I like that,
or an augmented fourth, or a diminished fifth, whatever. Anyway, all that is to say is one of the first things we learn with theory is the relationship between 2 notes. I got it.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
So and so that's one of the first things we learn, because then we can get into triads. Okay, now there's...
What is a triad?
A triad
Three
is
notes.
a combination of 3 notes, right? And so because we have the building block of intervals, and hopefully we know what those are, we can say that a major triad consists of a major third and then a minor third. Or relating everything back to the root, it's a major third and a perfect fifth. And so, great, we have a triad. Then we can talk about minor triads. Then we can talk about 7th chords, which adds a 4th note.
So a triad is 3 notes, and then a 7th is just adding the 7th root note over
Correct.
whatever key you're in.
More or less. And there's a lot of different types of seventh chords. Like there's a major 7. There's a minor 7. There's a minor 7 flat 5. There's a fully diminished 7th. And then we can add all these other tensions and interesting things like a major 7 with a 9, which I lean on that all the time.
Interesting.
You can
So major 7 with a 9. Can you show what note you're adding? That's the 9.
Yeah. So this chord consists of major 3rd. That's the major 7. That's the major 9.
Interesting.
So it's just consisting of one.
So it's your ring finger that's adding the 9.
Yeah. So it's consistent. Guitar is a weird instrument because it's separated by mostly fourths. So it's a very spread out instrument. Whereas piano, da 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 da. You're looking at it chromatically, right?
Right.
Guitar is like this very spread instrument. So we have to make. So on a piano, you would learn 1, 3, 5 as your first triad. On guitar, it's more spread out. So this voicing is 1, 3, 7, 9. So we're skipping the 5 altogether. Which
And when we say 1, 3, 7, 9, we're saying first note.
I'm
third
saying
note,
this
fifth.
is the root, this is the 3rd, this is the 7, this is the 9. And so on a piano, you might want to go 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and that would be the most basic way to play that kind of chord. On guitar, I'm skipping the 5th. I'm playing the 7th before the 2nd. Like we break all these rules to like fit the voicings into our hands.
Right.
So I don't want to go too far down this road because
Right.
it is getting very technical.
Yes.
I love this stuff, but I don't
very
want to lose
interesting.
people too much.
Yeah.
But I am curious, when you start to play guitar, you're interested in shredding as opposed to chords. What's the first like full shred that you learned? Do you recall?
So I was getting extremely high with my friend who was a drummer, and we would try to play Buckethead songs. And the good thing about Buckethead songs for me as at that time was the chords under them were very basic, and I didn't have to play over complicated chord changes. They would just be like really dark stuff that I could just play a basic minor scale to, like so I was literally playing like unaccompanied with a drummer just shredding in his basement, and we were obliterated out of our minds. And so
Do you think smoking helped you unlock areas of?
I think like clearly smoking works for some people to be like brilliant creatives like Seth Rogen or something.
You heard it here, kids. Do drugs.
Yeah.
Pat Dimitri. I'm just kidding.
It clearly works for some people. I think if it unlocked anything for me, it was just like an obsession with music. Like I would listen to music and be like, this feels like magic, and so I need to demystify this so that I can play like that.
Well, and it's funny because this kind of goes back to your talk about passion and turning that into action. It's like that's all well and good if you get fascinated by it because
While
of the
you're
drug.
stoned,
But
and then when you're not stoned anymore, you're just like,
nah.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and you could just be in that trance and be like, "Oh, this is amazing," and not do shit about it.
magic,
Like,
bro.
great.
Some people are fucking killer at like at being focused and type A when they're stoned, and God bless them. I'm not one of them. So like I think like as a young man, like teenager, like yeah, I could get stoned and just like have the TV on and be like have my brain off so that I could get some physical stuff under my fingers.
I can't do what you just
Yeah,
did, but
do-
I'm not
do-
stoned.
Do that again, man.
Most people shouldn't be able to do this because it's a learned thing. Just like a
Right.
toddler can't drive a car.
Right.
That actually is like one of like the most pivotal licks that I learned, because I was staring at bootlegs of Buckethead and his fingers were flying across the fretboard like that. And unfortunately, you can't. I mean, if you're looking at this on video, I have very average sized hands. Whereas all my idols, these guys at the time, Vi and Paul Gilbert and Buckethead, they're all like. Well, Steve Vai's like maybe 6 foot, but like Paul Gilbert and Buckethead are like 6'5"
got
with
the
these like
long
absolute
fingers.
Skeletor like fingers, and so I had to figure out how to do it with my like Jimmy Dean sausage fingers. So I would be looking. I looked at all these bootlegs, and I saw Buckethead doing this with his fingers. Eventually, I went down the rabbit hole. Paul Gilbert gave lessons to Buckethead. He was like 20, Buckethead was like 18. And so I look up a Paul Gilbert bootleg DVD of him doing lessons, and he breaks down the lick, and it sounds like shit played slowly, but for whatever reason, it captivated me, played in a fast context. And you could learn the scale shapes, the geography of the fretboard, and you could apply that lick everywhere. Like
and that was kind of training you also on hammer-ons and pull-offs, yeah?
Yes, because that particular lick is a combination of picked notes and legato notes, and that's the whole thing, right? Because you have to, when you're learning fast technical stuff, you have to pick and choose your spots where you pick everything and where you legato everything. And my picking hand came way later, but I could do legato stuff for whatever reason.
Show the difference.
Let's see. What's a good...
Like picking is obviously...
So like with that, I'm picking every third note versus like picking every note is like...
And you kind of hear more of the pick running across the instrument.
Right, there's
as
more
well.
attack, right?
Yeah.
So like,
whereas legato, you're using your fretted fingers.
You're using your left hand to apply enough force to either pull off or
which is obviously a lot easier with an electric instrument.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And so like the legato stuff is harder on your left hand, and the pick stuff it's harder on your right hand, but it's harder because the
meshing
connection between your two hands has to be very precise to do fast stuff.
And also, in order to be able to go fast, you need to be able to pick up and down, and that's something that was so difficult for me starting out. I was someone that very much wanted to just do downstrokes, and I mean that's a facet of wanting to play punk music and stuff like that. But
your hand always goes to it.
Yeah, you've seen it.
Totally.
Yeah, I definitely fall into that.
Yeah. I mean, and these are. At first, like, you have these limitations and you lean into what you're good at. So I was good at legato, so all my playing was legato. But then eventually I wanted to learn how to pick everything because it's a different sound. And so I want to be able to access these different aesthetics. It's like a painter that only knows how to use the color blue. It's like, well, they might want to learn how to paint with other colors at some point. And so to me, these different techniques are just different colors that you pull from for your palette.
So did your kind of focus change at some point where people were asking you to now play songs and it became a social instrument for you?
Right.
And now it's like, okay, now I got to learn something.
Freebird, man!
Right. So I still never went down that path, but what changed for me is I went to college and I was undecided for the first year and a half. I didn't think I was going to be a professional musician, certainly.
Where'd you go to college?
Northeastern, which is in Boston. So not a music school, but they had a music industry program, and I was just like, I'm most in the music, so I'm going to do this program, I guess. I don't know how wise it is to let 18-year-olds decide what to do with hundreds of thousands of dollars. Just on the record,
not wise at all.
I would just like to put that on the record that it seems incredibly strange that we just collectively have decided that's okay.
And that people are like scoffed at for not knowing when they go in, and it's like, let's not like figure it out with the facilitators of this program and like choose like a good career path for myself once my brain is like maybe a little bit more formed and under the realm of this educational society. Let's just I'm gonna do this.
Yeah, they're like 7 years away from having a formed frontal cortex, but let's let the kid that hits a bong and probably huffs glue decide what to do for the rest of his life.
Yeah, I'm gonna be a business major. That covers everything, right?
I would be a businessman, man. Anyway, I get to college and then I think I joined a blues rock ensemble. I don't know if I had decided my major at that point. Maybe I did. And I was like, oh, I'll join an ensemble. And I start getting exposed to this, what became my guitar teacher, who was the professor for that ensemble, this guy named Gennaro Landgrebe. And he was a Berklee graduate and a very accomplished guitar player. And so I start taking lessons with him, and he's like, all right, you can sort of shred. You don't know any chords. You don't know any theory. You don't know what's happening. And I'm going to fill in the gaps for you. And I was like, cool.
And at that point, did you feel that the instrument was still just a hobby, or were you kind of stepping towards it being a career and building a foundation for that to be, the driving force of your life?
I mean, I'm probably like 20 at this point, so I don't think I had any delusions that it was going to be a career, but I knew that it was the only thing I was obsessed with, and there was just nothing else that interested me.
And you were still telling your dad you were going to be a doctor.
I never said that. I never told them that. I even I should have done the smart thing as a kid and just told them what they wanted to hear, but I couldn't lie. I just was always authentic, which
helped
creates
you
friction.
and hurt you. I'm sure.
It creates friction when you're always honest about stuff. And I never misled them into thinking I was going to do something that actually made sense. But I was just
so with the music not necessarily being your career path at that point, what was the idea, or did you not have an idea of what you were going to do with the rest of your life?
I was just I'm studying music industry. I'll do something in the music industry.
Okay,
right.
So something peripheral to it, even if it's not that thing.
Yeah,
Got
totally.
it.
I think. And,
okay.
Anyway, so this dude Gennaro becomes my professor for the next 2-3 years as a private teacher, and so he fills in all the gaps for me, and he introduces me to jazz. We did some classical music. This is the only thing that I retained.
Dave, I gotta learn how to really play the guitar.
That's really cool.
No more faking it, man.
I want to play that.
But we were mostly focused on jazz, and so he's exposing me to all those chord voicings.
That's a ninth. That's a seventh with a ninth on there. I think
I would call this a major 9.
Major 9. So okay, see, I just
Very
learned
good.
something
There
right
you
there.
go.
Yeah.
Retaining.
Yeah.
This is also a very famous chord, where it was already existed in jazz, but Hendrix popularized it and used it in a different way. So a lot of people call it the Hendrix chord, but it existed prior. You would call it a 7 sharp 9.
Oh, so I was 1 sharp off.
No, you had fucking idiot. You were right about the first one.
I see.
That's a minor 9. That's a 13, dominant 13.
The Hendrix chord. Which of his songs would we have heard that in?
So many,
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean he
That's
put
Foxy
it in.
Lady, right?
Yeah, no.
No.
Foxy Lady is
right.
Also kind of uses the same chord.
Yeah.
It's all over his shit. I mean, not to go into a history lesson, but he used it in a blues rock context and used it as a 1 chord, whereas jazz, the jazz context uses it as a 5 chord. Neither here nor there, but to the one person that listens to this that's going to understand that, this was for you. But anyway, so he starts filling in all those gaps.
Well, and to my knowledge, Hendrix was an anomaly already because he was playing the guitar backwards, right?
Dave,
Yes.
He put the 5 as the 1.
He put the
Yeah,
5
Come on,
man.
man.
Yeah, no, he's also playing a right-handed guitar, left-handed, upside down. Yeah, yes, and
Ridiculous.
there's only a handful of guys that have ever done that. There is a modern guy, Eric Gales, that does that, who's also amazing and is maybe the next iteration of that kind of playing. Very cool if you're into blues.
And where are you on that?
In terms of,
Just scale of player in the world.
that's not for me to say.
You're very good. Very good.
I mean, it's not for me to say. I hope that everyone wants to have some level of recognition, but that's a very fleeting thing, and it's an external thing. I think the police are coming because my licks were too hot.
Here we are.
Hope they're good back there.
Yeah. Hope everyone's
No,
okay.
I mean, it's not for me to say because I experienced a lot of ego ups and downs, as I think any professional musician does, right? So I started touring when I was 24 with Watsky, and we started out doing grimy clubs. Maybe the biggest show we did on our first tour was 500 people, which to me, I was fucking thrilled. I was I was getting paid pretty much jack shit. We were in a shitty van. But in New York City, we played for 500 people and we played our asses off. And I was I made it.
And let's kind of take us back to that part of things, right? Because we were kind of leading there. So
Right.
we decide that music's not necessarily a career at this point, but we're doing the learning thing.
Right. So I spend
whoever's teaching you tells you you're amazing.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, early, he was just yeah, you can, he starts teaching me. I get the
You
chord
can shred, but you need
vocabulary.
chords.
Yeah, he splits the difference. I learned the chordal stuff. I become a more well-rounded musician. I get way more into jazz, which is just a really important conversational foundation for musicians. Most educated musicians are going to have a jazz background, especially if they're guitar players. Obviously, orchestral instruments might have more of a classical background. Anyway, so I start getting towards the end of college, and I'm like, I think I just want to play, man. And he's like, it's not gonna be easy, but you're good, you can do it. And so I drive out to L.A. I just get sort of lucky with my connections, and I find Watsky and his the other musicians working with him, and we're on the same wavelength, and they're in a place where they're trying to build from scratch, and I'm trying to build from scratch.
And at this point, are your parents horrified that now you're following the musician's career path?
Oh, they're still horrified, and I've and by all accounts, am vaguely successful, and it's truthfully scary for all of us.
Right.
12 years in. It's still scary, and I mean, I think that's a personal thing where we're just anxious people.
Well, I think that we talk about that a lot on this show.
No blanket.
There's no blanket. It's like
Right.
it's the gig industry. It's like freelance working for yourself.
And even to tie it into Web3, which we'll get to. Jesus, this chronology is. I was born in 1988.
No, it's good. I mean, it's interesting, man.
Yeah. But even so, when I had just for filling in the gaps, I had some absurd months in Web3, just like a lot of either creators or traders or whatever. And even so, I'm making the most money I've ever made in my life as a creator, as an artist, as a musician. And I remember being the most anxious because I was like, this is going to go away. Mm-hmm. I was like, I finally got it, and now it's not going to last. I have to find out how to manage risk and be responsible, whatever. So there's always going to be sort of job insecurity when you're self-employed. Mm-hmm. Fucking musician.
And something interesting that we were kind of talking about before the show is that money doesn't go as far as it used to.
Yeah,
and that continues to be a trend. You know, we were talking about how real estate, you buy a place in Texas and it's 10 times the size and a fraction of the cost of a place in LA, and it's just wild that there can be that massive discrepancy across the country, and the fact that our parents, you know, could afford to buy a house on a normal working person's
for like
salary.
8 raspberries and a nickel.
Right, yeah.
Sold for $1.6 million in 2021.
Right. And now
Absolutely
you'd be lucky
insane.
to get a mortgage rate that's under 7%.
Yeah, we're around there. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny because people like to talk about NFTs and crypto as a Ponzi scheme. I'm like, real estate is the biggest Ponzi.
Yeah.
It's just a Ponzi you can live in, which I guess is a big deal. So anyway, I'm trying to stay focused.
Yeah,
here.
yeah. So in
I
the chronology, now we get the gig and it's 500.
At most 500. Some shows it's like 200, but I'm like, oh my god, there's
with
I get to
Watsky.
play in front of 200 people. We have a full band. Everyone is educated musician. Everyone's killer. I mean, we sucked at the time, but there were good bones there.
And what kind of stuff were you playing? Just all improvised, or
No, so
because it was the jazz, right?
So Watsky's a rapper, right? But his music is very informed because his tastes are very eclectic. So he has a lot of jazz, a lot of old school hip hop. We have heavy rock elements at times. We have songs that are 808 heavy and super maybe trap adjacent or something. So we covered a wide spectrum and tried to take listeners on a journey.
That is the best musical phraseology I've ever heard. Trap adjacent.
Yeah,
that should be its own genre. That's awesome.
And so it was truly a pleasure to be a part of that and to grow with that. And so we just start touring. 2012 we do a tour. 2013 we do a bigger tour. We do I think we did 3 or 4 months in 2013, which included
and who's writing all of the music?
It's Watsky was definitely steering the ship, and then he would pull in different producers or musicians to contribute to stuff. I had more involvement on some albums than others. The most involvement I had, I think, came in 2014, and this guy, who's now a pretty well-known figure, Anderson .Paak, was a big part of our writing, and he was
That's really cool.
Yeah, so
wow.
We were just talking about him on a couple shows. He's amazing.
Yeah, we had in a musician, Aaron Halford, who said one of his major influences was Anderson .Paak, and he talked about meeting him outside a bathroom.
Right.
Pretty funny story.
Yeah. So I was very close with him because Anderson was the main producer of Watsky's 2014 album, All You Can Do, and so I was pretty involved in that. I played on a lot of songs and I produced maybe 3 or 4 with Anderson, and then Anderson went on tour with us as our backup singer for that.
Oh, wow.
For that album.
Wow,
cycle.
that's amazing.
And he was also on our first tour, by the way, the 2012 tour. Our opener. You said you lived near K-Town before.
Yeah,
I lived in K-Town. Yeah.
Yeah, so our opener was this guy Dumbfounded, who is like the de facto president of K-Town. He's a Korean rapper, and he's an actor and a podcaster, and he's just an amazing talent, comedian. Anyway, he was our main support as the opener, and Anderson was like playing drums for him. So that's the first time we met Anderson.
Wild.
Yeah, that's the first time we met Anderson and all these other cool musicians. And Anderson would do like 1 or 2 songs on his own. He was just starting to be his own artist. And so he would do, his name was Breezy Lovejoy at the time. He would do 1 or 2 songs, and then Dumbfounded would do his set, and then we would do our set. And so we all saw that Anderson was like very, very special, even at that very primitive state. And so Watsky, George is his first name. George was like, I'm trying to get Anderson to produce my album because like this dude just has a crazy ear.
Oh yeah,
he's just got a crazy aesthetic. And so Anderson gets hired on to do the album in 2014, and then he gets hired on to be our singer. And so we toured for probably 6 months that year, and so we were very close. And you know, and again we co-produce works together. That Watsky songs that are, you know, they probably have like somewhere between 5 and 10 million streams. Like they did good, and.
But you know, and we talk about this with other artists. You didn't see any money from that streaming.
Very little.
Yeah.
No. I mean, like the amount of money that I've made from streaming in my entire career has to be less than like. I mean, less than like $8,000 probably, and I've produced like a lot of works that have millions, if not hundreds of thousands of streams.
I just heard Snoop Dogg saying something about his people contacting him about 1.5 billion streams, and it wasn't even $45,000.
That has to be because of his splits, though, because that's absurd. Because there's probably just so many mouths to feed. Because the prevailing wisdom is 1 million streams is on Spotify is worth around $4,000. So 1 billion streams, doing the math here, a billion is 1,000 millions. He should be getting 1,000 times 4,000, which is what, 4 million?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Did I do that right?
Dan?
4 million, yeah.
So he should be getting 6 million. 6 or 60? I don't know. It's more than 45K.
Right.
But it's because there's so
if
many
he got
melts.
45K, then
There's a lot of melts to feeds between his label, his manager, his lawyer, the producers, the musicians.
the guy that was sitting in the back of the room that needs to collect money for doing something.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyways,
Yeah. No, and a lot of times,
Looking
like the
cool.
label will fund finance a music video, and then the money for that music video gets paid back.
It gets
through
recouped.
something like the streams. So
Right.
yeah, when you're talking about the split, but yeah,
Right.
I mean, even so, it's
That's insane.
a fraction of what it should be. Is
Right.
the point?
Right. Okay, so I'm trying to like make sure that I don't absolutely fucking put the audience to sleep. So I want to make sure that we're on track here. So we've gotten to 2014. We've gotten to my fucking.
No, I'm loving
my
this.
Anderson,
and I think people are probably fascinated as we are. It's really
Yeah.
good stuff. So yes, you get involved with Anderson .Paak,
Right.
and you're kind of playing to Paak.
Yeah.
Paak.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me.
You're good.
Excuse me.
I mean, he won't
Sorry.
be happy about it, but he probably won't listen to this.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so
Yeah, he's not gonna hear it.
thank God. I just talked
Well,
so much shit on him
Yeah.
about him last show.
We were saying that when the last guest that met him outside the bathroom,
Right.
and he was very nice. We're like, actually, he probably had to take a shit too, man. That's why I was being nice. He's trying to push you along.
Yeah, yeah.
Anderson, actually, he's
Anderson
You're like,
is-
he actually doesn't poop that much, man.
Right. He's genuinely one of the funniest people I've ever known. Like he's always like because at the time we were still touring in a van. We didn't get a tour bus until 2016, and so 2014, when you're just in a van with 10 other people all day, every day for months, you're just bullshitting each other. Like we would like. For whatever reason, I became a target because I take everyone's questions so literally and seriously. So people would be like, "Oh God," people would give me an either or. They would be like, "Would you rather like eat this disgusting aquarium fish that we just saw at the Thai restaurant whole, or I don't know, have sex with Donald Trump, like whatever?" And like they would give me this either or, and I would go into the tank and I'd be like, I don't know, for whatever.
really thinking
You're like,
about it very hard.
I guess I'll have sex with Donald
I was
Trump.
like, I guess. I mean, if I'm pitching, I guess. But like, it would just be like,
if you do it while shredding, he would probably like it.
So you're saying it was very appropriate that I started off with the question, would you rather lose your eyesight
Yes.
or your...
For whatever reason, I took all of them so seriously. But like me and Anderson would have a certain dynamic where we would just push each other. And there's definitely like footage of us having asinine conversations because we're fucking brain dead because we're touring. I mean, the schedule is like, I mean, sometimes you get a break where the shows, you only have an hour and a half drive, or you have a day off even. Oh my God. But a lot of days you're driving 4 to 6 hours. Then you're setting up. Then you're sound checking. Then you're playing a show. Then you're carrying your own gear back. Then you're going to some shitty 3-star hotel and you're doing it again the next day. So like your brains are turning into complete mush. Things get a lot easier once you get the tour bus because you sleep during the drive. The driver drives overnight. And so you wake up in the next place. Granted, not the best sleep in a twin-sized bed that's essentially a coffin.
Climb up in the side of the wall.
Yeah, while driving. Some people sleep better than others.
And in those times, is there ever a moment where you lose some of like the passion for the music, or lose kind of like?
He's like pretty fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Well, no. Listen, I'm sure it's very easy to kind of feel like, geez, man, I'm just being trucked around the country or around the world. And like when I get there, I play my set, I go back on the bus, and it's like very confined and it's just a rote routine.
Of course.
I don't know.
No, of course. I mean, it's just anything that you turn into a job, I don't care how cool it is, you're going to have some days that are different than others, right? Like, again, I bring things back to basketball as an analogy just because I'm into basketball. But fuck, I wish I remembered it.
That would have been great.
I probably.
There it is.
I'll figure it out later. We'll get it later. It's been a while. Yeah. So like. Yeah, they play 82 games a season. Like, there's some nights where LeBron James is fucking not trying, okay? Right. It just happens. And it's never to say, like, we take... I certainly don't take playing shows lightly. Like, people pay good money, and they have to get a fucking sitter. They have to find parking. Like... And this is supposed to be their break from real life. Like I take that very seriously, and as I get older, I continue to take it more seriously. Like, no, this is not about you. This is about someone else paying their hard-earned money.
Well, and when I was a young actor, I had a director tell me, if there's an audience member that's sleeping or on their phone, they paid for their ticket, they have that right to do that, don't let it bother you. Is that where you're coming from as well, or do you also feel like, okay, if I'm showing up in this way, that they should be giving me a certain level of respect to be engaging in the show?
I mean, I certainly don't think people should be like booing me and throwing beer bottles at me and shit, but like if they're disengaged, like I can't, there's not, I mean, if I'm bringing it and they're disengaged, like there's not much you can do.
Yeah, what can you do? Sure.
And that certainly happens. But yeah, night to night, like when you're in the thick of a 3-month run where you're playing 50 shows or something, yeah, like you might have a show where you're like, that was just a normal show and nothing was notable about it, and we did what we do, and that's it. And there's some shows where I remember this was with Anderson. We played a small club in Buhl, Switzerland, which is close to Geneva, and I had zero expectations. We're like, there's no way we have any fans here. Like, and it was 200 person venue or something, so like it doesn't take much to fill in the room, thankfully. So that always helps the energy if the room is full, even if it's a small crowd.
Totally.
And we're just like in this small town, and apparently, like they just don't get a lot of shows. So like the entire all the young people in the town came to our show, and it was like an event, and I was like, oh shit. And so like it was just a crazy show because of the energy they were bringing for us, like a relatively not famous group of musicians, to be coming and performing. They were fucking so into it, and so we were so into it.
Now, as much as we've talked about that there is no necessarily blanket in this industry or in any of these creative industries, especially when you're doing any sort of freelance work or you're a gig musician or anything like that, was there a sense at this point of, okay, well, I'm touring, I'm playing consistently, I'm making a consistent paycheck, I'm putting enough away that I feel comfortable, and now I can see this being a lifelong career?
Yeah, I mean, I just always think it ebbed and flowed, right? Because, like, yeah, you can go on tour for 6 months, and then the phone might not ring for a year. So that's the thing that we were talking about earlier with, like, managing your ego, and that's the problem with letting external factors decide how healthy your ego is or your general mental health is, because those external factors are frequently not in your control. So, like, yeah, I mean, I can tell you there's been very, very immediate humble pie moments, because in 2014 we played Outside Lands, and we got put on a pretty big stage for some reason. So there's probably, somewhere between 10 and 30,000 people. And so we were like, oh my God, this feels great. We had just finished Warped Tour, which was really good, but really hard physically.
Was that with Watsky?
Yeah. So my first Warped Tour, I played in 2 bands. One was with Watsky, one was with Wax. And Wax is another rapper, great friend, great guy. He had like a #1 song in Austria, crazy, so weird. The kind of shit that happens. But anyway, so we finished Warped Tour. It was very exhausting, very unglamorous, but very rewarding. And then we go straight into playing Outside Lands, and now instead of like 1,000 people being there, there's 10, 20, 30,000 people for the show, and we're in good. We just played 50 shows, so we're in a rhythm. So we went after, we had a great time, and we're like, man, we're feeling good about ourselves. The people that went on right after us, it's like Flume, Leaky Lee, like really big artists, and we feel like we're being legitimized, we're being treated like real artists. The very next day, we played a tiny club show in LA. This was like Anderson .Paak's stomping grounds. It was the name of it escapes me, but it was this really hip spot, and we were trying to be hip. We were trying to be cooler than we are.
And you're coming off the high.
We're coming off the high, and like we always looked at Anderson as like it's almost corny to say, but we looked at him as like the measuring stick for what cool was, especially at that time. And he was always playing these little club shows, and people are starting to know about him because of this like 100-person room where he's just playing cool shit. And so we tried to insert what we do into that club show, and Anderson played first, I think. Everyone's fucking loving it. And then when we go to play, everyone goes outside to smoke. There's like 8 people there, and they're not even into it. And fucking Randy Jackson was one of those 8 people, and like and for context,
And you're like, yo, dog.
yeah. To be fair, he was very nice to us, but like, and at that moment, we had the #1 hip hop record in America, and there's 8 people at this club that are like they're all probably super fans of Watsky, and that's why they're there, but they're not part of like the hip scene that we were trying to make ourselves a part of, right? Which was Anderson's scene. Very different aesthetics, and we were trying to be something that we probably weren't at the time. And so immediately ate the humble pie, right? So you play for 20,000 cheering people on the Friday, and the Saturday people are like over your shit at a grimy club with 10 people there. So I've never ever long term felt like I'm good forever. I've always felt like I was at square one no matter what.
That's quite an interesting thing to learn in such a short amount of time, or to like have that exposure to those things. Like you would think that would happen over the course of like, but the next day, that's wild.
Yeah, it was a particularly harsh.
I was
lesson.
gonna say, like, did it hurt, or were you just like, this is? Yeah, because I would imagine it hurt more because of the high that you were on from.
It hurt, but like, but it's like, at that point we've been touring that's 2014, so we've only been touring for 2 years, so like maybe 3, and so it hurts, but like it's also everything is just such a learning process. There's really no substitute for doing something for 10 years or 20 years. So like even if that thing is so niche and specific, like touring. Or being just a participant in the music industry, like everything is a learning process. We're like, so this is why we can't take too much external validation, because that's not a healthy way to feel consistently good.
I'll tell you something though, artists, creatives, like we're really a different breed. that you can know that you'll never feel that sense of security, that you'll never feel that sense of like, oh, you know what? Everything's fine now because this is we've done this gig, or we've taken this job and we're set up. It's for very few is it ever like that. So the idea that like the only time that it is like that is when you keep moving forward in these tumultuous waters. You got something to say over there, Dad?
Yeah, if you feel comfortable, you're probably a dick.
Right.
Yeah. I
mean, like, listen, like, I mean it's like, is there comfort for anyone in this world? I don't know, because like my dad was a doctor, has been a doctor his entire life. I've never seen that dude feel comfortable about money, like because of his growing up in Egypt as a middle class, a lower middle class dude. Like, so does comfort even exist? I don't know. So, yeah, some careers have been more stable than others in the past few decades. AI is about to just uplift everything and change the job security. So like, I think security is frankly probably a myth, and we're always going to have to find ways to survive and thrive,
to continue to adapt. It's like even like
Unless
my dad, for example, coming from Egypt, where he was also like lower middle class, to coming here where he was also a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
It's better than it was, sure, but that comes with more problems. Yeah. More money comes more problems. It's just like a different feeling.
More
of
money, more problems.
Yeah, it's a different feeling of uncomfortable. Like, you know, it's
I think I just cracked the code though. Toilet paper. Start a toilet paper company. Everyone will always need toilet paper. That's job security.
I don't know. Bidets might get more popular.
That's
I mean, you still need a sheet.
See?
Yeah.
But that was the crazy thing
You're right.
to me.
There's no job security.
As an aside,
not even in the shit
There's
business.
no blanket.
Well, in 2050, there's going to be machines that just suck the poop out of your butt.
While you're driving your Tesla.
I would
Yeah.
really like that.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Anderson .Paak is going to love that.
Then he won't have to worry about waiting for the bathroom, man.
Yeah, exactly. God damn, he's a crazy dude.
Are you two still in touch?
No, I haven't seen him since probably 2019. The first time I saw him after he had gotten famous was in India. So like this is 2017, and I knew I was going to see him because we both got hired to play the same festival, and I was like, okay, this guy that used to be one of my really close friends that I've toured with, I've stayed in hotels with for like 6 months. I watched him go from borderline homeless to like almost household name. I'm about to reunite with him for the first time in India since he became famous, and I was like, this is gonna be fun. And it was awesome. Like, just like,
And he looks at you and he says, "Who are you?"
no, he immediately was like, it was all love, and he was just like, do you remember when we did this fucked up thing that we can't talk about on publicly? And I was like, yeah, I do. Why are you yelling? Stop yelling about it. He's a great dude. I mean, I can't speak to exactly what his character is like as the rich, famous version of him, but I've always loved him, and when I see him, it's always great. Like I'll run into him outside of a jazz club every now and then, and it's all love.
Did you go to a show at the Forum?
No.
What was that, like a couple of years ago? I think he played at the Forum.
I didn't go. No, I mean, like, you know, I try not to push the issue with like people that are celebrities that I have relationships with. Like, if they want to be a meaningful part of my life, like, that's great, but I'm not going to be the dude that's going to like be like, I don't want to chase folks that if they're trying to enter a new chapter and they have their crew that they're dealing with, I'm not going to force myself in. But if it happens naturally, that's a wonderful thing. But I'm not the type of dude that's just trying to like climb a ladder just for the sake of doing it.
Totally.
But I do love that guy.
I think that's quite respectable of you. You know. Like,
yeah. Oh, it's ruined my career. But yeah, I do love the guy. But like, if our friendship rekindles in a meaningful way, it'll happen in an organic way.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But I've dealt with a lot of more famous folks. You know, post 2014, I got hired because of my experience touring with Watsky. Through the grapevine, people know that I am a competent touring musician. So I got hired to play for this artist, BB Rexa, who's like a major label pop.
Cool.
Yeah, a major label pop artist, which was something I was seeking because I deluded myself into thinking that, a major label pop, that means there's security. Spoiler alert, no. There's not.
Never.
But like, we had a good touring cycle for a year or two, and then she got me and her were very close. Very similar thing. We were very tight, very good friends. We would hang out outside of work and just like, you know, watch TV or whatever, watch a movie. We were homies. And then she got a new manager who just wanted to insert his own guys, and so he fired me. And so I learned very quickly that job security is not a thing. No, it doesn't matter how good you are at your instrument, how professional you are, how deep your relationships are, there's no such thing as security. So that was another important lesson. And that happened, you know, right after my 2014 stuff with Watsky and Anderson and blah, blah. That's like the next year.
Was there a point as you played more and more, got more proficient with the instrument to where it felt like second nature to you and like breathing, as you put it, where you kind of wanted to lean into playing more of your own music that you were creating as opposed to playing something that someone else did?
Yeah, I mean, it took a very long time to feel confident about being like whatever, the arbiter of my own creativity. Yeah, honestly, until I was in my 30s. But I think like all paths lead to that eventually. Eventually, everyone is going to try to do their own thing, and it might succeed, it might not. It might inform what they want to do in the future in terms of working with other folks. But yeah, I mean, the pandemic, so this is obviously 2019, 2020, is when I'm like, I'm going to work on an album. I'm going to try to sing because because I feel trapped and I don't see another way out, quite frankly.
And is that also around the same time you're getting into NFTs?
It's like right before.
Okay.
Because I got into NFTs at the beginning of 2021, which I guess is on the earlier side. But there's certainly people that got there before me. But so I had like completed an album and then found NFTs. So I like, this album is done, and then I find NFTs and they sort of take over for me. Like I didn't even release the album on Spotify. I just had like maybe 5 or so singles out, and then NFTs come my way, and I'm like, I just become obsessed. And I don't know. We can go down that road if we're ready to do that.
Well, I mean, yeah, sure. There's no right or wrong time. There's no wrong way to eat a Reese's, as they say.
Right.
So what got you into NFTs? Was there a particular person that pulled you in, and what was the appeal to you?
Yeah, so I had been friends with this photographer since high school, this guy named Dave Krugman, who is like, if you don't know him, he's kind of a pillar of Web3.
Being a Dave and knowing a Dave, I can tell already that he's a good guy because he's a Dave. So
Yeah.
that's all I need to know, man.
He's solid. He's a true pillar of Web3, and he has had, not that financial metrics are the only thing that give somebody credit, but
They're not?
They're not.
We've been doing
Where's
this
the
all
cat?
wrong,
They're
man.
not.
We shouldn't be upset about anything.
They're not the only metric that gives people credit. However, he has been profoundly successful as a photographer in Web3. We were friends since high school, and so I reached out to him for the first time in ages. We kept in touch a little bit, but it had been a while. And I reached out, and I'm like, dude, what's this? And he was like, come into a clubhouse room. I'll show you what's up. And he had a room scheduled already. So I go in. That's how I get engaged. He pulls me in. He gives me all the relevant info. And I just start animating stuff. I start trying to use my music as the driver of animation. So I, very primitive ways, start creating what I coined audio reactive art. Because I knew I could play music. I didn't know how to animate. But I was like, if the music is driving the animation, then as long as people have something to look at, I can trick them into listening to my music, which I feel confident about. And so at first it's very, very slow. And I'm still figuring out what the fuck I am at least as a visual creator. And then I start picking up steam. I start making sales to like friends, cheap stuff, maybe like 0.03 or whatever at the time. I don't know. ETH is probably like $1,200. So people are spending like $70, which during a bull run is like not that much. I start selling cheap editions. I start having, I think summer of 21, things are starting to get weird, right? Starting to get crazy. I'm really good friends with this artist, Pop Wonder. And I remember like he was just a kingmaker at the time. His stuff is selling for 10, 20 ETH, like his one-of-one drawings, right? Something like that. I could be wrong. Don't quote me. It was selling for a lot. And he would just like, I would do a drop. I think I did like a 10 of 10 for, I think they sold for like 0.08. He retweeted the drop and he was like, this is a really cool application of music and visuals. That shit sells out instantly before I can even process it. It's going to secondary before I can process it.
Wow.
The secondary is going for like 0.8 or something. It 10x'd the same day I dropped
Holy
it.
crap, dude.
And so I have a day where I'm making, I don't know, probably like $3,000-$4,000 in a day. And for me, I'm like, that's a shitload of money as a musician.
Yeah.
It's for anyone, right? Maybe not for the average like crypto Bitcoin miner from 2010, but for me, I'm like, this means that this path means something.
It means that this career could be sustainable.
Yeah, and it felt very, very different to be the sort of only
master of your own destiny.
Yes, the only steward of my own money. I didn't have to wait for a phone call. I didn't have to negotiate a rate to say this is what I'm worth. I made something. I sold it. I paid my bills, and that was truly the first time where I was like, maybe I'll be okay. Anyway, so that leads into a much crazier month, which was September, where I. By the way, that August, I turned down 3 tour offers because I was like, I'm never going on the road again because you're gonna pay me what I make in 2 days.
What I make in 1 hour.
Yeah, but I have to go on the road to do it. Like fuck that. I'm gonna make it from my room and make way more.
It's wild.
And I don't think I've received a tour offer since. which is just how it goes sometimes.
And just to backtrack for 1 minute, when you were touring, was there, we talk about that when you do any sort of a creative thing with someone that's of a very high caliber, it's a learning experience. Mm-hmm. So, Aaron Paul talks about when he was acting across from Bryan Cranston throughout the seasons of Breaking Bad, he only got better and better. Mm-hmm. Can you recall a specific instance when you were playing with someone that was of a high caliber where you kind of had a new lease on the instrument because you had never thought about doing something this way, or they opened something up for you in that way?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to pinpoint an actual moment, but I remember and to this day, I feel my relationship to music getting deeper and deeper every year in such nuanced ways, because like that's how it goes. Like when you get to, let's say, I'm not claiming I'm in the 99th percentile or the 1 percentile of best musicians on the planet, but like let's say when you get to that 1 percentile, when you start increasing by 0.1% above that, those margins are such a big difference in terms of how I feel. And so I really feel like it's just reps. So playing so many shows with guys like Anderson, with my drummer for years, Chakudi Hodge, with my keyboardist and bass player for the years, Kush Modi, Max Miller-Lauren played trump and synth, Camila Recchio, like one of the most preposterous vocalists on the planet, and Watsky, one of the best rappers on the planet. Like we got to play hundreds and hundreds of shows in. Sometimes we were playing festivals where people didn't give a fuck about us. Sometimes we were playing in front of 2,000 people that were chanting our names, like whatever. It just got deeper and deeper and deeper, and we all grew together. So it's really hard to pinpoint a singular moment.
But you did see that growth over time, just kind of playing with people of a high caliber.
I still feel it today. Yeah. Like, and I stream guitar playing a lot these days, and I feel myself getting better just doing that. And listen, is the average listener going to hear the difference between me now and me 2 years ago? No, but I feel the difference, and it's also about like consistency. Like I can be more consistently good from day to day, because you're just not 100% every day. And that's another thing with live shows is like sometimes my solos just weren't as good as I wanted them to be. And so it took, I think I got better at being good night to night. But on any given night in 2013, I might have killed it.
Right. And that's funny that you point out that an average listener might not recognize, because it's always very interesting to me when you're talking to someone that is of a high caliber in whatever they're doing. Like Dave here is a fantastic cinematographer, and he can notice the littlest things. So when we're looking at the frame of something that we've shot, or that he shot rather, and I'm like, well, I mean, no one's really going to notice that. He's like, well, but I notice, and this could be way better. And it's like those little things that do separate the good from the great. And while the average person may not be able to recognize or appreciate that, they'll feel it in some way. Yeah. They may not be able to articulate it, but they'll feel it, and that's right. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think all the little things add up to something, and like this goes back to the ego conversation. Like if you're not constantly trying to get better, it means that you think you're great, I guess, or you're comfortable with where you're at. And I think there's a level of narcissism there that, it's just not super cool, but also like it doesn't, you just don't improve. And if you're not constantly improving, I think it's hard to get to where you want to go, because there's 7-8 billion people on the planet. There's going to be somebody that's constantly improving. If you decide I'm good enough, or I feel really good about myself, and like everyone fucking sucks except for me, then you're sort of just hurting your own progress anyway. Totally. So I do think all the little things add up, and that's something I relate very heavily.
And I think to that end, when it comes to the moment to apply those things, if you don't do yourself the service of applying them, or it's like you notice that but you're not going to change it, then like you're hurting yourself in the long run even more.
Yeah.
Because it's like in those times where I'm like, oh, we could make this better, but sometimes it's like, oh, we don't want to rush, or we just want to rush, or we just want to get the thing done. Mm-hmm. So it's like you don't put that time and effort of all the things that you've amounted and learned into your next project.
Yeah.
Which I think we need to do a big part of that is like.
And there's always constraints, right? There's always budget constraints and time constraints, but that's also another skill is picking and choosing your spots. Like no, we need to take this the whole way, or no, like we do need to save time here, and this is not going to make a big difference. Like,
right. And
that's
this
a skill.
and this is why we're here, recognizing that, like, you know, because and he's kind of brought that to my attention sometimes in those moments. It's like, yeah, you could rush through that, but why are we doing all of this?
Yeah,
we're doing all of this to create a final product that we're proud of, that you know it falls in line with our initial vision. Like, let's do that.
Yeah.
You know, and take that time.
Totally.
Okay, so I kind of took us down another divergent side path, but you were talking about how, you know, while you started to see becoming the master of your own destiny, selling these things at prices that you felt you were valued at, it gave you a sense of autonomy. You were able to step away from touring, and you stopped kind of taking touring offers.
Yeah. So and then I think late August, maybe early September. It had to have been. Yeah, whatever. It's around there. It's still 2021. I tweet out, I X out. I tweet out something like, I want to be on the front page of OpenSea by next year, or like sometime next year. And the same day, OpenSea DMs me, and my tweet got like good traction, and everyone's like, "You could do it," which was very sweet. This was back when people could see my tweets. Shout out to Leon Husk. Anyway, so OpenSea DMs me and they're like, "What's up? Like, what you want to do?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "You tell me."
Oh, hi, OpenSea.
Yeah, it's like,
how are you?
Are you free later? No,
Do you come here often?
I suspected that like I maybe had a good chance because I had a good relationship with their social media manager, this awesome artist, Lizzie, and we had became close, and then she got the job, and I was like, again, the last thing I try to do is treat people like I'm trying to climb a ladder. It's very important to me that my relationships are real, just so I can live with myself. But also, I think it does benefit you professionally when you don't treat people as fucking objects.
Right.
And it's just the right thing to do. Anyway, so she must have pulled for me, and so I get.
But that goes to how you were raised. So shout out to your Egyptian parents.
Shout out Sarwat and Mona.
Yeah.
Shout out Sarwat and Mona.
Yeah, they're lunatics. So anyway, so eventually I have these drops ready. They put me on the front page of OpenSea, and my collection does absurd volume at that time. This is like Pico top. ETH is probably ETH is above 4K at that time, which, hey, we're right there again.
We're right there.
We're back,
coming back, baby.
Yeah. Even though ETH NFTs are struggling
nowhere to be
to
seen.
make up the
little
gap.
bit, yeah.
But
we're coming back, baby.
So my collection now at that point gets to like nearly 100 ETH volume. A lot of it is secondary, but you know, I think again, the financial metrics aren't everything, but I'm sitting there going, my collection is now have like damn near $500,000 in volume as a music art collection. This has to mean something. I don't know if it means that I'm going to be okay, but it means that maybe I know what I'm doing a little bit. And maybe that also means I can continue to grow for myself, but also maybe I'm somewhat of an authority or one opinion that might be able to help other artists and musicians, and presumably why somebody would care to interview me, right? So that to me was just a big moment. You know, I continue selling drops every week, every 2 weeks after that, and everything's still going well. Obviously, the market bottoms out, and I take a step back to assess what the fuck I'm doing. I just lost so much money, like everyone did. This is like a year later, and so I was like, let me do a bigger project. I think the really bearish market will respond better to a bigger project that's very cohesive, as opposed to trying to sell out a drop every week, every 2 weeks. So in April or May of 2023, I finally get out this project called Noise. So I started learning how to 3D animate, and that was my focus for a year, maybe 2 years. And I put out this almost 200-piece project, and that sells out in the Pico bottom. And I was like, all right, I still got this shit. This shit still works.
when you were learning to 3D animate, was that a facilitation of, okay, I need to figure out some new tactic to be able to sell these things? Did you have an actual interest in the animation, or you know?
I just felt like at this point I had been leaning off of footage that I would like either license from friends, or I would find clips that were legally appropriate to license for what I was using them for, and I would either add impose a certain color scheme and try to. I was using After Effects to. It's sort of hard to describe, but like you can look at my early work and see exactly what I'm talking about, and try to just impose a certain aesthetic. And I really enjoyed that aesthetic, and frankly, I want to revisit that. But I just felt like I could do more, and I wanted to create stuff that was where I didn't have to lean on as much outside material. And so that was the onus for me to pick up 3D, just because Blender is an amazing product and it's free.
And did that process of learning that feel arduous, or was it enjoyable?
It was somewhat. It came relatively quick. I like to hit the ground running with shit, and I put out a 3D drop like the same month I installed Blender, and
That's awesome.
And it did really well. And I look back on it, and I'm like, okay, I know I'm a lot better now, but like people were stoked because the music was killer, and it was a different look, and people spent their hard-earned money on it. And
are you still using Blender till this day?
Yeah, I'm trying to start picking up Houdini, which is
Yep, that's the next level.
It's
like that's like industry standard.
Yeah, it's absurd.
Well, my business partner over here, Dan, keeps showing me the time clock, so I do want to kind of pivot into some of the music.
Yeah.
Would you grace us with a song from one of your drops?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm sitting here with my guitar, and so much of my compositional approach and my playing approach is just like me playing, right?
Right.
We talk so much about the improvising, so all of the stuff on my drops is stuff that like I either made a visual and this is what came out, or something came out and then I made a visual to it. So I just want to play, if that's cool.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
And
we would love that.
What does this room inspire you to play?
That's a dangerous question.
Yeah. What do we inspire? What are the Daves inspire you to play? What does my half Egyptianness make you want to play?
The absolute like trope in like media or like movies or TV shows is whenever this is like, especially if like a white dude is like the producer or like the music director, is that whenever like a brown person comes on the screen, it's like yep. Which is it's a very specific thing.
We are in the desert.
Yeah. Anytime you show a turban,
Yep.
Like a white dude can't wait to insert that. No, I mean, listen, I play what I play. It's like it's a reflection of what's inside me all the time. And
he's standing outside. He's like, dude, I got it. An idea.
Yeah.
Dude, wait a second.
But no, I would say like from day to day, like my voice as a guitar player is like relatively consistent. Of course, things are different. Sometimes I reach for stuff, but this is I just play the way that I play.
We love it. So yeah, I mean, if you just want to kind of jam out for a little bit, we'd love that.
I would love to.
You're
Holy
so good. It's
shit.
like you literally just don't mess up.
So
I feel like
that was a really cool medley. I don't know if you were able to hear within,
Somewhere
but
Over the
somewhere
Rainbow.
over
I
the
heard that.
rainbow.
Yeah,
And
there was another song in
yesterday.
there. Yeah.
Good ear, good ear.
Yeah.
That's what it's about, man.
That was really cool.
Fucking
Hell yeah.
cool.
That's
yeah.
super cool.
I like that you think that I don't mess up, but the truth is you just get way better at covering up your mess ups.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also that sense of like when I was talking about when he notices something on the screen as someone of a certain caliber.
Yeah.
When you do gigs, I know friends that have done gigs and like they're like, man, I fucked up so many things. And I'm like, what did you fuck up? I didn't hear a single thing. And like as the general audience member, you might not hear that stuff, but as the musician, you're probably like, motherfucker.
Right. No, I mean, I think what the goal is to make sure that your 80% is killer, right? And so if you can make sure that your 80% is super good and you can hit 80% almost every day, then you're good. But if your 120% fucking sucks, then like you're in bad shape, right? So that to me is always the goal. I know I've accepted that some days I'm going to be 110%, some days I'm going to be 70, but if my 70 is better, is not, I don't want to say better than most people's, but if my 70 is enough for some people to listen to me and be like, oh shit, like I want to engage with this dude, I want to be a fan of whatever he's trying to create, then I feel like I'm in good shape.
How much do you like versus dislike using pedals and things like that? Because from what I could tell, you're kind of just playing clean most of the time. You've got a little bit of the whammy going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I use this thing here called a Kemper, which is an amp profiler, and it does have like a pedal board that lets me like maneuver about it. But honestly, most of my tones, I have a clean tone, I have an overdriven tone, and I have a more overdriven tone, right? And I can I can show you an example of like slightly overdriven.
Do you feel like some of the overdrive allows you to cover up some of the mistakes?
I would actually argue it's easier for me to play clean. I think overdrive can get away from me if like they're just like two different spots in my brain a little bit. I have to play differently.
When we've jammed in the past, I've told Dave, hey, throw a little bit more distortion on that, and he goes, it's not going to make you play any better.
Right. Those are facts. Yeah. No, I mean, like, it can get away from you. Like, compression and saturation can get away from you.
Right.
Yeah.
I have to play differently based on how much overdrive I have.
Okay.
But no, I keep my shit simple. Like, yes, I'll use choruses from time to time. I'll use wahs or auto wahs from time to time. I love using delays and reverbs. But other than that, if I'm putting effects on stuff, it's usually happening in post.
Right.
But when I play live, my tones are clean, overdriven, more overdriven, maybe a chorus, maybe a delay, maybe a wah. That's sort of it for me.
And then let's get this mic out of your face while we...
So this is like slightly overdriven, right? What I like about overdriven sounds, especially with the single coil guitar, is it's clean if you play delicately. But if you dig in, like, it gets a little crunchy, right? And so that to me is a very expressive sort of dynamic.
Fucking cool, man. So as
Obviously, you can just
keep going
do this.
all day long.
And I'm curious because a lot of people have trouble putting their finger on a favorite song or a favorite movie or things like that. I do happen to have a favorite song, and whenever it's by a band called Ted Leo and the Pharmacists. I don't know if you've heard of them.
No.
I know it's very niche. But
that's not your favorite song.
It is. It's called
it's
Counting Down the Hours. It's absolutely my favorite
You've never
song.
played that for me, man. I'm offended.
I'm sure I have.
I'm offended.
I'm sure I have. But the point being is that I play that song when I'm in a good mood, when I'm in a bad mood, and it's like it resets everything for me, right? Is there
I've known this guy for like 15 years. He's not showing me his favorite song. I
I
thought we were best
can't-
friends,
I
man. It's
can't
bringing
believe
you
you
out of
don't
bad times, and
But-
like you're
but-
just let me figure it out for myself over here. Come
Plenty
on,
of people
man.
know my favorite song is Counting Down the Hours. I'm surprised you don't, but we'll play it later. I'm going to play it for you today.
Okay.
But the point is there something that you play on guitar that, like, when you're in a bad mood or in a good mood, you're just like, I just want to play this song because it feels good.
Yeah, I mean, I do lean. I'm starting to,
And I don't necessarily mean putting on a song to listen to. I mean actually
you mean playing,
physically playing.
No,
yeah.
I'm starting to lean into like you caught Somewhere Over the Rainbow. You caught Yesterday. There's like one or two other Beatles songs. I play a lot of I created an arrangement of Smells Like Teen Spirit that's super. It's like a jazz. I mean, it's a cover of a cover. It's a cover of a cover, and I created a backing track for it, so I lean on that. But I'm trying to think if I figured it out like fingerstyle. Like it requires a backing track, but I've leaned on that a lot.
Are you familiar with Rodrigo y Gabriela?
Yes.
So
acoustic players.
Yeah, they're from Mexico City.
Okay.
And they play acoustic and they play like flamenco style, but then incorporate like all of this heavy
well-known
metal,
songs,
heavy metal songs and stuff like that. And it's super cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think like all of this shit, like all this shit is great, but also if you don't tap into something that's familiar for people, it's hard to grab them. And
that's something that I was just listening about was like going crazy on the guitar. Like maybe people won't relate to that, but if you play something like from the song that they just heard, and that's like what starts your solo, and then through your solo you're kind of like touching on a familiar part of the melody or like the verse or like the lyrics.
Earlier on you mentioned the Gregorian chants, and you know there's something that I've talked to other cinematographers about on this show, that there was composition that occurred throughout cinema over the ages where they used notes from the Gregorian chants to back major cinematic moments, and you see it in Star Wars and other major films, and it's like this sense of familiarity for the audience that have heard this epic thing before brings them back into that feeling, and that's why they continue to use those tropes and things like that, and you see those appear throughout different compositions.
Yeah. Gregorian chants are super interesting. If I recall correctly, it's almost all fourths and fifths, and that's why it has this sort of hollow, ancient sound. And because back then, if I recall my history correct, they felt like any intervals that weren't perfect. So fourths and fifths and octaves, any intervals that weren't the perfect intervals. That's the vocab we use for those. Felt dissonant to them. So even like a major third sounded dissonant to them compared to and so like they just leaned heavily on like just all in fourths, all in fifths. So if you as a contemporary composer are trying to make people feel to harken back to that time, if you invoke that kind of harmony, it's gonna fucking work, and that's true across the board.
Yeah, and I mean, even again, just playing on people like having a sense of familiarity, remembering a feeling, and coming back to that so that they engage more with the music. That's how all musicals are essentially constructed. You have the entire score of the musical. They play all of the songs, at least snippets of them, in the overture in the beginning, so that as the songs come back throughout the piece, people have some sense of, I've heard this before, even though they've never heard any of it before.
Right. I mean, repetition is one of the most important parts of music, right? And like,
what did you say? Say it again.
Yeah. Repetition is really important. Like if you think about the makeup of a conventional pop song, it's like maybe intro, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, or something. The chorus is repeated. The verses are different. The intros and outros are different. The chorus is the hook, is the part that you remember. It's the part that's repeated, and that's what essentially decides whether or not something is going to be a hit or not. And when I construct guitar solos, even when I'm improvising guitar solos, if there was a strong melody in the song that I'm soloing in, and I have enough time, I'm almost always going to reference the melody at first, and then I'm going to go off.
So it's like you bring them into, you're like, oh, wow, that's familiar, and then you, and then you might loop.
And if I can create variations on it, even better. But that's the best way to construct a solo. And obviously, like if you just go straight into shredding, you could play the exact same. Technically proficient, cool stuff, but if you don't like lead into it with something for people to grab onto, it doesn't hit the same.
Right.
For sure. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for giving us so much of your time.
Did we do it?
I have one last question. What are you doing now other than just like making stuff for like NFTs and like on your X page? Are you like collaborating with other artists? Are you producing for other people?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm trying to get super back into hitting, the audiovisual art super hard. As I alluded to off, I think before the podcast started, that I moved recently and it took up so much of my time. So
right down the street from me.
Yeah, exactly. And so I haven't had time to focus on stuff. So there's been a project I've been mulling about in my head for about 3 years, which is related to cymatics, which it's a broad subject, but it's pretty much like certain resonant frequencies create like beautiful fractals. So like if you have this guy Chladni discovered this in like the 1600s or some shit, I forget the year, a long time ago. You put sand on a plate and you vibrate the plate with different frequencies. It creates certain frequencies create different fractals. I recreated the math of that in Blender so that I could have more control over it. And I'm trying to compose music to those fractals. So that's a project I've been trying to fucking figure out for 3 years. I have a Chladni plate in my closet. I tried to film it, didn't look good, so I recreated it in Blender. It's starting to look okay. So that's been
maybe I could help you film it.
Please, yeah. It just didn't work the way I wanted to, and I didn't have as much control as like in 3D. So that's been something I've been wanting to get out for a long time. And then other than that, I'm just branching out, trying Houdini. I'm into them. I love the fluid simulation stuff, and I love how music composed over fluid simulations looks. Like, I love Jesse Woolston. I love Rafiq Anadol. And I think taking that kind of aesthetic, but making the composition be a way more prominent part of it, I think will be very well received, I hope, in Web3. So that's where my head's at.
And I guess to leave us with, or to leave the audience with one last thing, if anyone is listening out there that's seen guitar players just wail and they say that just seems too far away from where I am right now to ever be a reality,
right?
What would you say is the first step they should take in terms of learning the instrument to where like they're on the path at least?
I think mentally, based on how you asked that, I tell this to kids all the time because I stream on TikTok, so I get like 15-year-old kids coming in that want to learn guitar, and I'm like, people pick up the guitar and they're like, I guess I suck. No, everyone.
That sounded like the beginning of Reeling in the Years.
It's good, yeah, good stuff. I think what I tell them is to be good at something, you have to be bad at something. You have to be willing to be bad at something, and you have to be willing to be bad for probably a long time. And so you have to find a way to not be discouraged by the process of being bad. Because I was bad, because everyone on the planet is bad at something the first time they do it. Yeah. Some people might learn faster than you. I don't think I'm a particularly quick learner, but I got to a place where I'm
where we think you're sick,
where I'm arguably good at what I do.
Well, and then like you said, as you get better now, the incremental is way bigger. So when you learn what you would call a little bit, it feels like so
massive.
Much more.
Yeah. So if you're, I mean, my first practical thing is get a good teacher if you can afford one. I understand if you can't. But it's like...
Even as someone who's self-taught, you would say that.
Yeah, well, I did take lessons in college, right? Because that's what filled in the gaps for me, right? And I got as far as I could self-taught. And once I got a teacher, I was like, oh, I'm a huge idiot. And listen, you can get where you want to go self-taught. But it's like, you can also take a bus instead of taking a plane. Like, it'll get you there if you want to fucking sit on a bus for 50 hours instead of just taking a 4-hour flight. But if you can't afford one, then you're going to have to dig through the infinite amount of information and misinformation on YouTube or Reddit or wherever and try to find out because you don't know what you don't know. So you're going to have to decipher now what you're supposed to figure out. It's a fucking insurmountable task, but you can do it.
That is wild because I feel like that's kind of where I'm at as a guitar player. And like I have wanted to pay for lessons, but it's like a lot of money.
Yeah, of course.
And
it's not cheap. I charge
you want a barterman?
$100 and $200 an hour. And I think I'm on the cheaper side. But yeah, so this just goes for, this is just a life lesson. It's not a music thing. It's like, if you want to be good at something, you have to be comfortable with being bad at it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
I don't know if you have enough time or inclination for this, but if you maybe want to play us out with a little something.
Fuck yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you so much to our audience for listening today. We really appreciate you. Thank you to Pat Dimitri for being in studio with us. We love you all. This has been another Sapo Studio Scratch Track Saturdays. We'll see you next time. This is Pat Dimitri playing us out.
We love you.
Thank you.